Hey, what's up? You miss me? Oh, okay. Hey, now people often ask me, and when I say they often ask me, I mean nobody asks me, but I'm trying to make a point here, so let's just go with it. They say, Rory, they don't say it, what makes a classic album? Now, my usual response is, well, there's a few factors involved in it, really. So, one is the actual sound of the band on the album. So, if they do something unique, so that can either be if they're completely inventing a whole new style that changes the game completely, then, you know, for example, I don't know, refuse the shape of punk to come, pretty much defiantly saying, okay, well, you know, this is how it's done now. This basic thing that you're doing that passes for punk music ain't gonna cut it anymore. A lot of the shit that's out here ain't gonna cut it anymore. We are taking sound and flipping it around and doing our own thing. So, big factor there. And then, I guess there's also doing the similar thing, but either doing it so much better or in a much more unique way than everybody around you, or just really approaching it from an angle that it's never been done before. So, I mean, I guess in the realms of uniqueness, I guess Clutch. I might have talked about Clutch before. Have I talked about Clutch before? I think I did. Yeah, Clutch would be an example of that, because if you describe Clutch to somebody, it's what do a Clutch sound like? Well, they sound like a rock and roll band. Well, you know, it's not particularly original, but when you hear Clutch, you think, oh, well, they don't sound like any other rock and roll band that I've ever heard. So they've got something completely onto their own. So there's an element of uniqueness, first and foremost, that I believe is imperative to a classic album. The next thing, I guess, would be songs, of course. So, sounds pretty obvious, but the strength of the songs on there, and more importantly, I guess than the strength of the songs, is the consistency of those songs as well. So, how much filler is on there? You know, really a classic album, you could pick any track from there, pretty much, and put it against anything that's around at that time, or any of their peers, or pretty much any other album you care to name, and that would still go toe to toe with it. If I pull Leper Messiah out of Master of Puppets, you know, probably not the best song on there, but you know what, it would go toe to toe with most metal songs, as an example there. So yeah, consistency there. Also sequencing. Sequencing is a really, really big thing as well. So the order in which you place the tracks can really affect your listener's experience of the album. So the way that it flows. So if an example would be System of a Down's Toxicity album, and that is an example of a perfectly sequenced album that really ebbs and flows in the right places. It's fast in the right place, it slows down, it goes weird in the right place, it builds back up. It's a perfectly sequenced album, and it's about putting the right songs on there that fit that sequence. So if you actually went to their second, well, the album they released after that, to stop the gap between Toxicity and their next album, Steal This Album was a collection of songs from various points in their career. A lot of those songs were from the Toxicity sessions, and you know what? There's a few on there that are actually better than songs that are on Toxicity, but they wouldn't necessarily fit the flow of that particular album. So that's where sequencing is really, really important as well. And the last ingredient is well, time. Bit of a cop out, but time and the way that you view something after time has elapsed. And it's only then that you can really kind of tell if something is a classic or not. There's plenty of albums that have came out that people have said, oh, this is an instant classic, only for that to kind of enthusiasm to diminish over the course of, you know, a year, even a few months in some cases. So sometimes you have to actually let a bit of time pass and look at the context in which something came out, and your reactions to that album if you revisit it later as well. So some albums which you think, yeah, brilliant, they're not necessarily all that. And equally, some albums where, you know, personally I've thought, yeah, it's okay. As time's gone by, I thought, well, this is just cast iron classic, brilliant. So The album I'm going to be talking about today certainly ticks the first three boxes, and I think there's a good chance that that fourth box is going to get ticked as well. So the band I'm going to be talking about is Oceans of Slumber, and this is their second album, Winter. And when I say second album, it's in a way it's kind of the first album because there's a marked change in their sound and a brand new singer on there as well. So this this is something that I've sat with for the last 3 weeks, and it's the most exciting thing I've heard in such a long time. So this is, the best way I can describe it is progressive metal or progressive rock, but that's just a really convenient category I'm putting it into here because it's really hard to describe, and I think prog just generally covers such a wide palette of sounds, but it's very much a progressive album. The sound mixes pretty much all of my favourite things together. So they've got like a brilliant kind of soulful singer. Cammy Gilbert is the lead vocalist here, and she is a real revelation. Just somebody that's not necessarily adopted a metal approach. It's very much kind of a soul background, but there's a cleanness and clipness to it that really suits the precision of the music on here as well. So she is a real kind of shining star, and you know she's going to get a lot of plaudits, and rightly so. But it is not just a one-woman show here. So yeah, soulful vocals, but we've also got elements of doom. We've got elements of the best kind of prog metal. There's bits that sound like Opeth. There's bits that sound like Emperor. So there's definitely a black metal kind of death metal contingent working in here as well. There's bits of folk. There's bits that remind me of kind of weird stuff like Tom Waits in places. It just really runs the gamut of pretty much all the things I absolutely love about heavy music. First song, if you want looking for a good place to start on there, the title track Winter is a really great place to go because it's 9-10 minutes of pretty much everything that this band does well. So you've got the beautiful folky intro, you've got some gorgeous vocals, some wonderful bits of crooning, but there's a sinister edge that comes into Cammy Gilbert's vocals as well. You've got some of the most fucking astonishing drumming I've heard in a while, some really kind of busy kind of death metal technical drumming with a bit of kind of blast beats thrown in there as well. You've got the almost neurosis kind of slow, sludgy, atmospheric, molten slabs of riffing with some bellowed vocals on there as well, and some really top draw guitar solos. But it all hangs together as one kind of song. You don't feel like they're going completely off structure. You don't feel like you're getting everything put at you at once. There's so much going on, but I think having particularly a singer that kind of centres it, and the quality of the songwriting just makes you feel like you're listening to a conventional song, even though all hell is breaking loose all around as well. And then the next song, Devout. I may just bomb right down this list of tracks because they're all great. But Devout, yeah, it's definitely got a kind of a black metal feel. Again, this really feels like Emperor or Ishan's solo work, but again with some really kind of top draw seductive vocals, and yeah, just really kind of epic. Also reminds me of bits of Devon Townsend, particularly the Deconstruction album as well. Just brilliant. And then, you know, there's a cover of Nights in White Satin by the Moody Blues on there, which is way better than you'd think as well. Again, that does incorporate some blast beats, but not in a novelty way. I think it is just manages to be really faithful to everything that's great about that song. You might not think it's great, but it is a classic song. Everything that's kind of integral and great, particularly the vocal performance again, but they add their own kind of twist on it. There's some really kind of wonderful kind of slide guitar playing on there as well. Some great soloing that kind of feels really progressive and Pink Floyd, a bit in a modern day. And again, there's a lot that reminds me of Opeth on there as well. So classic there, and then it pretty much from this point onwards, a lot of the kind of big showy tracks are preceded or followed by some interludes on there, and it feels a little unfair and disrespectful just to call them interludes, because they are really classic components of a classic album. So these kind of things like Lullaby, which is a beautiful, croon, simplistic interlude, and then an instrumental later, Rest, builds into one of the highlights on here. Also something you should definitely check out. It's a song called Suffer the Last Bridge, which is a much more straightforward alternative rock song, but it has these kind of ethereal, almost Eastern melodies in the background, really strong driving chorus, great bluesy vocal performance, and it reminds me of the best bits of A Perfect Circle, particularly the first album. So songs like Judith from the first Perfect Circle album come to mind there, and yeah, brilliant song. And then again, we've got a beautiful little instrumental with a bit of flute playing on there, and then there's a twin attack of Sunlight and Turpentine, which are probably the mellowest thing on here in a lot of ways, and they really are exhibiting another side of the sound of this band, because they're really kind of laid back, smooth kind of songs. This is where I say the Tom Waits thing kind of comes in, particularly on Turpentine. There's just a beautiful little jazzy kind of outro to it that reminds me of bits of Rain Dogs and Swordfish trombones, that kind of quirky guitar playing. But really hook-filled choruses as well, and then there's a lot more kind of breathy vocals on here, but used in a really kind of cool, seductive way. And yeah, I mean, this kind of middle of the album is very much accessible, almost kind of radio-ready rock, but with so many kind of different twists and unique approaches to the way that they actually present these songs, that that it won't feel like it's just, all right, we've got to knock a few singles out. It's really just a welcome break as well. And then from these kind of more mellow passages, we get to Apologue, which is just thunderingly, astonishingly heavy. Like, this is an absolute just heads down monster of a song. It ebbs and flows beautifully. The drumming on it is just absolutely insane, and it just peaks up and down. The vocals, although there's definitely some death metal and black metal vocals on here, Cammy Gilbert's vocals are still singing, but it's a lot more kind of nasty and snarling in its approach, and it is just it's just a masterpiece, really. It could go on Blackwater Park, it could go on In the Night Side Eclipse. It is just top extreme metal, and you know, it is. If you ended the album there, it'd be great, but it actually still carries on. So I mean, the last track, full song I want to highlight is This Road, which again kind of builds up all the best elements of what's gone before. It's not as extreme as Apologue by any means. It rocks a bit more than the mellow songs. Brilliant kind of chorus. It builds up beautifully, and it reminds me of a Ghost Reveries era Opeth in a lot of ways. But although I'm drawing a lot of the comparisons here, this is a band utterly unique in their actual sound and approach. So I don't want to kind of say that they particularly sound like anybody. These are just touchstones and touch points that illustrate the company that they're in. This is a brilliant album. This is my favourite thing that I've heard this year, and it's really difficult for me to actually listen to other things at the moment, because this is just in my stereo. If you like good metal, without seeming snobbish, if you like Gojira, if you like Mastodon, if you like Candlemass, if you like Emperor, if you like Neurosis, if you like Opeth, of course, or Porcupine Tree, Anathema, this band does all those kind of things that those bands do. This band has that special something, and it's an astonishing work, and I can't recommend enough you check that out. It's something that's not that hard to get into. It's instantly likeable. But it's something that really, although it's a cliche, benefits repeat listens as well, because you know there's something more complex at work underneath it. But you know, for the first 2, 3, 4 listens, you're too busy going, "This is great," dying in your head, loving the riffs and loving the choruses. So yeah, Oceans of Slumber, Winter, check it out. And you know what? I'm going to be right back for another review as well, because there's a lot to talk about. Right, see you in a bit.